Picture this, it's 2018 and absolute banger games are coming out.
Boom, bam, bop.
But before these games came Far Cry 5. When you played it originally, you found it disappointing, but overall thought, it's alright.
No one is coming to save you.
He's not lying, guys, no one came to save me from this terrible game. But as always, I'm gonna be telling you everything about this game as it is, so if you were expecting me to be biased because of nostalgia or because of my current opinion of Ubisoft, then I just want to say that
I'd like to take this chance to apologize to absolutely nobody.
graphically, overall, the game is visually pleasing. The environments look good with plenty of detail. I mean, most of the times they do. Bro, people don't understand, but these apples are a reference to the Wumpa fruit from Crash Bandicoot on the PS1. The best thing about this game in terms of visuals is how the DLC weapons and cars look. Now, coming to what's not so good in terms of visuals is, there is so less visual variety in this game, which is such a huge letdown. The 3 regions look identical most of the time, with very mundane differences among them. Like, there's more rocks in this one. There's a big statue in this one. Far Cry 3 did the most with differentiating the rainforest type areas with the more militant region. And I don't even feel like it's fair to compare Far Cry 4's visual variety with this game, because it just straight up curb stomps Far Cry 5 into a grave 6 feet deep by having so much visual variety in the different areas of the main map, plus having different locations like the Himalayas and Shangri-La, which were just downright awesome. Now, the performance on PlayStation 4 is pretty much locked at 30 FPS most of the times. On PC, it is inconsistent and not very good, even if the benchmark tells you otherwise. Big surprise, guys. It's not like every modern Ubisoft game has a shitty PC port. And also, yep, Uplay is still required regardless of the store where the game was purchased. Now, the music in this game is really good, especially the songs. One time I was driving and Rocky Mountain Way started playing on the radio and I was like, let's get to the gameplay side of things now, starting with the gunplay. This time around, the gunplay has been targeted to be more quote-unquote realistic, so now the effects no longer have any arcadey or intensity feel to them most of the times. This part is totally subjective, but I personally think they shouldn't have messed with the gun feel of the game, as I think it was already really well tuned in Far Cry 4 with the right balance of arcadiness and realism with all the movement, camera shake and stuff like that. What's really good is that there's more guns available, among which my favorite are the Alien DLC weapons, man. They are really fucking cool. The best part of Far Cry 5's gameplay though is without a doubt are the melee weapons. Using melee weapons instead of guns is the most fun you can have in this game. The worst part about Far Cry 5's gameplay though is the AI, which makes not just the combat system but the entire gameplay just fall apart. I swear to God, this game has the most brain-dead AI I have seen in a modern AAA game in a very long time. That's not to say I didn't have any fun with it, because to be honest, I did. I was laughing at it and having fun for all the wrong reasons. For example, if it wasn't for this shitty AI, I wouldn't have been able to have fun just yeeting melee weapons, but I have to talk about how broken it is outside of this particular melee-only scenario.
You are a lifesaver, man. Now I got another life that needs saving, please.
The problem is, Ubisoft didn't catch up to the technology of 2018 when making this game. Hell, they didn't even catch up to the technology of 2004. The push towards so-called realism already stripped the fights of intensity, and the AI just adds insult to injury by removing any challenge they might have had. Remember how intense fights got in Far Cry 4, especially in the fortress missions? Well, the developers of this game sure as hell didn't. Because first of all, fortresses are gone, and second of all, because of how they're designed in terms of their architecture, you can complete the majority of outposts by just climbing to the top of a building and just shooting from up there. That's right, guys, we removed the incentive for running and gunning for most of the game because our true vision lied in making you feel like a camper. Now, I know that standing still and shooting is the future of gaming, but because we know some people like movement in their FPS games, you're also allowed to walk and shoot, and it's
Super easy, barely an inconvenience. Oh, really?
no need to thank me. Now, that's not to say that the game never has any good fights like the previous games. There were a few times where the game genuinely got challenging, mainly when there were a lot of enemies in an area where you couldn't just stand on top of a building and rain bullets. But these combat scenarios were very few in number. Majority of the time when you're in a fight in this game, you'll pretty much just be going through the motions rather than having any remarkable feeling of satisfaction. Many times, even in situations when you're up against a shit ton of enemies, you can breeze through the game because the AI can't comprehend how to counteract the most basic of shit. What I appreciate the most about Far Cry 5 is that it's a game that lets you take your sweet time with every enemy. Oh, that was a nice throw, buddy. Well, still good. You're gonna get me eventually. Here, I'll move closer for you. Okay, you're just trash, bro. This is a game where you can walk up to an area with like 4 or 5 machine gun wielding enemies with a fucking baseball bat and still come out on top without breaking a sweat. And if you're planning on doing stealth, you can get this game to finish with just one hand, which is a reference to you jerking off because you have... The AI during stealth is even worse than during head-on combat, and if that wasn't enough to rip the satisfaction out of being a ninja, they committed a sin by removing those brutal knife takedowns. We went from this to this. We went from this to this. Not to mention wingsuit takedowns, vehicle takedowns are not even available. I appreciate the main menu for being honest and clearly stating that the only change that the difficulty setting makes is purely based on damage. But even if it didn't, it wouldn't have taken me long to figure that out, because this is a game where getting hit by the previously mentioned rocks or stones deals the same amount of damage as getting hit by a bullet up close. This leads to another problem in the form of a scenario where the game is filled with frustrating artificial difficulty by throwing multiple bullet sponge enemies your way. Speaking of enemies, there are zombies in Far Cry for some reason now. Also, there's this enemy type called cult VIPs which chew up bullets even though they are not wearing any body armor because visually consistent enemy design. Now, as if the game wasn't baby mode already, you also have companions to help you in combat. These are unlocked by completing missions specific to them on the map. Now, I'll be honest, it is fun to see a bear called Cheeseburger rip apart an enemy outpost for like the first 2-3 times. But then the game starts feeling like it can practically play itself, and that is when we have a problem on our hands, ladies and gentlemen. Not to mention the companions are sometimes even more brain dead than the enemies. Let's get back in the fight, my dude. And he's dead again immediately. And I'm dead because of him. Now some doofus in the comments is gonna be like, but you can just remove the companions.
No, let me say something.
By doing that, you're actively putting yourself at a disadvantage as your character's progression is tied to the companions as well. Now before we get to more downgrades in the gameplay side of things, let's talk about something that is actually good for a second. That is the vehicles. The driving in Far Cry 5 is good most of the times, but there are some situations where it feels a little too slippery. Biggest improvement in the automobile department is that there's just a lot more in Far Cry 5 than 3 and 4, and some of these are really fucking cool. You now have the option to spawn vehicles, whether it be for skies, land, or water. Some of these vehicles can be used in combat as well, which I thought was awesome at first, but then later on I realized that they make the combat even more easier than it already is. Regardless, it was fun to engage in airborne combat between 2 planes when it didn't drag on for too long, that is. Okay, playtime's over now. Time to get down and dirty and talk about more downgrades to the gameplay. First up, the grappling hook. The grappling hook is super situational now and doesn't have much importance to it. Most of the times you'll only find yourself using it to climb to the top of a building in an outpost like I mentioned earlier. Meanwhile, I'm out here platforming with it like a Giga Chad in Far Cry 4. The wingsuit is no longer thrilling to use because unlike Far Cry 4 where the world was built with verticality in mind, this world's bland nature makes it boring. In fact, the only reason towers exist in this game is to give you some actual airtime with your wingsuit. But then again, the time you spend climbing these towers is longer than the actual time spent gliding. But hold up kids, because I don't think anything compares to how much of a Johnny Sins penis level of a massive fuck up the progression system in this game truly is. Far Cry 5 reminds me of one of my mathematics teachers back in the day who told me not to overdo the simplifications when solving algebra problems. That is exactly what Far Cry 5's progression system tried to do, and it completely shot itself in the foot in the process. First of all, this game doubled down on making the thing I dislike the most about Far Cry 4's skill system as compared to Far Cry 3 even worse, and that is skills requiring too many skill points to unlock. If you thought 4 skill points for a single upgrade were bad, boy are you out of luck, because this game requires 7, 8, 9, 10 skill points for one upgrade. Moreover, stuff like switching to snipers has been purposefully painfully slowed down in order to get you to buy skills to improve it. Secondly, you buy the grappling hook and wingsuit instead of obtaining it through the progression in the story. Thirdly, this game introduces a challenge system that allows you to get skill points by completing some basic challenges, which is all well and good. But the problem is, some of these challenges depend on your companions getting kills and stuff like that. And by now, from what I've told you about the AI, you must be able to tell how stupid of a decision this was. But none of the above 3 fuck-ups compared to what I'm about to tell you now. Remember the crafting system from previous games that had you hunt the various wildlife in different ways for gear upgrades and acted as another way of incentivizing exploration while adding to the natural sense of progression? Well, too bad, honey. It's gone. Now you use skill points to upgrade your gear. Good lord, this game is retarded as f. Now that we are on the topic of exploration, let's talk about the game world of Hope County. The map of Hope County, Montana is such a big step down in terms of atmosphere, complexity, and just the overall immersiveness. Is actually sad. It never once felt like a living, breathing world that incentivizes you to explore during my entire playthrough. While Kirat had an exotic sense of character with its architectures, flora, and fauna, which made it such a memorable location and was responsible for Far Cry 4 being an immersive and incredibly atmospheric game, way more than any other game in this series. Hope County is a bland, uninspired, empty, and downright boring as fuck game world to be in. But thankfully, the developers were at least self-aware about this and added a ridiculously high number of fast travel points so that you don't have to drag yourself more than once through this lifeless open world. Every moment of Far Cry 5's playtime has a feeling of some amount of jankiness and bugginess, whether it be in or out of combat, which is another big reason as to why I found zero immersion in it. And that's not even considering the multiple times I experienced game-breaking glitches, which I'll talk about in a bit. While Far Cry 3 and especially Far Cry 4 felt like well-polished experiences for the most part, in this game I couldn't even go 15 minutes without finding something messy. Overall, it just has this unfinished and lazy feeling to it in every aspect. It's time to talk about the mission design and story now. The mission design in Far Cry 5 is an April Fool's joke. When this game tells you that there are 52 missions in a region, don't be fooled, because in reality there are only 4 missions which are copy-pasted at different locations at the map. These are clear an outpost, but this time as a mission, go bring my vehicle back, go fetch me 3 Yabba Doobas, and some miscellaneous shit like unlocking doors in a safe zone, tail some for infinity, kill 3 bears, walk a slow ass AI cat back to its cage. Wow, bro, this is so entertaining. This much repetitiveness would have still been a problem even if the core gameplay was fun, but as you saw earlier in the video, it's not. This game has nothing up its sleeve to spice things up in missions and keep the player interested, except for this one time. The Shangri-La side missions from Far Cry 4 are more intriguing than any main mission in Far Cry 5. Set pieces here are a joke, most of the time it's just car crashes. Meanwhile over here in this fucking game, I'm gliding from one Himalayan mountain to another. The idea that you can take on any region when you want sounds good in theory, but in reality it makes this already incohesive ass game even more disjointed feeling. Also, it would have been nice to see some actual changes from clearing one region before the other. That would have added some replayability to the game as well. The differentiation between story missions and side missions doesn't matter because pretty much all of them are equally lazily designed, equally as boring, and not to mention equally as game-breaking buggy. One time I got stuck in a mission because the game spawned an enemy on the other side of the map. Here I failed the mission because the stupid enemy AI refused to get inside a helicopter which I was supposed to tail. If you die during a mission, you get respawned at a fast travel point like 200 meters away from where the mission actually is. Well, in the previous game we had motion captured, clearly animated cutscenes that provided context that gave the missions more weight, motivation, and the player more incentive. Over here in this fucking game, not even accepting missions is satisfying since 95% of the missions don't even have cutscenes, and instead, this is how you accept missions. Okay, bro. Okay. Now you're just walking into me. Just what is this game, man? The quest giving NPCs can't die, so when they get downed, they just flail around for eternities, and 90% of the time they can't even do that right. You'll reach a quest giver and this is how you'll find them. Not to mention that the lip syncing of their dialogue isn't even right. Good lord, this game is trash.
What?
Let's talk about the story now. The game begins with you choosing the gender of your character and a video of the residents of Hope County describing the cult that is overtaking the place. You arrive in Hope County, Montana to arrest the said cult leader known as Joseph Seed. You land at his compound and are immediately being stared down by his followers. See what I did there? After finally managing to video game slow walk to the church, you see the rest of the Seed family for the first time, which is comprised of Daniel Bryan, Poison Ivy, and bootleg Conor McGregor. Your ally, the marshal, shows Joseph the warrant for his arrest, and he's happy to have the cuffs put on him.
Oh, kinky.
Now at this point I would make a joke about not putting the cuffs on him and leave for the alternate ending, but every other motherfucker on this platform has already done that. In fact, this joke of me making a joke about other people making the same joke is not even mine. It was used by Pyrocynical in his video about this game. This was me using the same amount of originality Ubisoft uses while making their games. You put the cuffs on him and video game slow walk him back to the helicopter as all of the cult members around you lose their minds because of his arrest. Now as you might have guessed, the video game helicopter does the ritual of crashing. You wake up and you're greeted with Joseph responding to the radio while practically breathing into your nose. The sheriff gets captured, but the marshal you arrived with manages to escape. You too manage to escape eventually, and then after a brief tutorial, reunite with the marshal. Then a poorly designed car chase happens, which is the hardest mission in the game as you can't tell where you're being shot from during most of it. Your car crashes off a bridge and the marshal is captured as well. You on the other hand are saved by bootleg Walter White and taken to his bunker. He drops some more exposition on you, and then you get to use the shallow underwhelming character customization system to design your character. Praise the Lord that the villain models from the previous game are in this game. Okay, you need Uplay credits to unlock Voss. Then you are released into another tutorial which explains the story's progression system. Finally, after liberating Dutchess Island, it is then up to you to choose to go to the region you desire to rescue your friends from each of the Seed siblings while also helping the resistance against the cult. The rest is up to you to find out. Now, as you might be able to tell, the opening follows the standard Far Cry method, and in my opinion, it is actually pretty good in its execution as well. Like if the entire game had the tone, the vibe, and atmosphere similar to this, I would have actually somewhat enjoyed it. But by now I think we know better than to expect consistency from any aspect of this game. Here's the deal. Far Cry 3 was the story of a spoiled kid turning into a killing machine because of all the insanity he's put through on an island that is out to eat him alive. Far Cry 4 was the story of a man getting caught up in a war while trying to fulfill his mother's final wish and in the process discovering his and his family's past. Far Cry 5 is a story about a mute motherfucker accepting quests and doing whatever the people around him want him to. This has genuinely got to be one of the worst implementations of a silent protagonist in the history of gaming. And it's not that your character can't speak, it's that he doesn't speak, and I know that because when you catch a fish he goes like... It's awkward when a scene implies that your character is supposed to speak, but he just stands there spectating like an idiot.
You've seen the ultrasound. It's a girl.
Well, that was on a messy black and white TV screen. You know them things ain't reliable.
Funny you should ask, my guy. I would give you my opinion, but I can't fucking speak. It was a major reason for me having zero connection or care for any character in this game, which completely severs the entire point of the majority of the missions and the goal of rescuing your friends from the leaders of the regions. And speaking of your friends from the beginning of the game, you spend like 3 minutes with them in total before they get captured, and now all of a sudden I'm supposed to care about saving characters I just got introduced to? Get the fuck out of here. In a failed attempt to counteract the fact that your character doesn't speak, many times the other characters in the game constantly keep on speaking cringy, irritating shit over the radio and just never shut the hell up.
Take a sharp left at the crop circle and fly super low along the river.
Okay, I get it.
Stay low here.
My guy, are you joking me? Time to talk about the villains now. John Seed and Jacob Seed are just alright, I guess. They both feel like a reskin of Joseph with just slight changes to their personality. Faith, on the other hand, is my personal favorite villain in this game. She has the most amount of depth to her character than all the other villains. She's made more interesting by the fact that her story leaves some stuff to the player's interpretation. The most memorable mission in the game is also in her region, by the way. She also has a great personality. Now coming to the big bad, Joseph Seed, and he is fine. Now I'm not talking about his sexy aviators, which are in fact sexy. He is incredibly acted out, but this game's pacing and choreography just f***s him up most of the time because the creators of this game think the villains getting extremely close to the camera at a kissing distance to your character is somehow supposed to be intimidating. Bro, why is this turning romantic? This is not scary, this is just sexually tense. Again, all of these villains could have been played out better if there was some amount of back and forth between your character and them. Also, the way this game gets you to these villains multiple times is laughable. You progress in the main story by building resistance points, by destroying structures, completing missions and stuff like that. After reaching a certain point on the resistance meter, you get captured and taken to the villain. This happens 8 separate times in the game, and then you escape those 8 times as well. Like, what? Also, you can get captured even when you're in the middle of another mission. Another way of saying what I just said is that you can get fucked over by the game. This happened to me when I was almost at the end of a mission, and to add insult to injury, the dialogues from the mission I was in when I got captured were still playing during my escape.
Get some Peggy chatter over the radio. Oh, of fucking course.
The final mission of each region is to destroy a bunker, in which, gameplay-wise, Far Cry 5 turns into the worst linear shooter of the last 10 years as it sees you walking down a set of hallways. Equip a machine gun and you can seriously complete these missions with a laptop trackpad. In my opinion, overall, this is a cookie-cutter story where a crazy guy prophesizes something bad is gonna happen, and then it happens, which has been executed way better by other pieces of media. As a matter of fact, the ending of this game exists solely to set up an even worse spin-off, and it is truly baffling how disrespectful it is to the player's time.
Don't waste my motherfucking time!
So in conclusion, in my opinion, Far Cry 5 is not just a bad Far Cry game, it is a bad game in general. This might just be the cheapest feeling game with an $80 million budget. Where the did all that money go? It's like it takes everything that made its predecessors good and shoves it in the bin for things that take less effort to create in the development process. It is unfathomable how in 2 years we got from Far Cry 3 to Far Cry 4, and then when we had a bigger time window of 4 years, we got this disaster of a video game. If you've never played a Far Cry game before, then maybe you'll like it, but if you have played the previous 2 games, you will most likely be disappointed as and wish you could get back the time you spent on this game.